My name is Jake Miller, and we're here at our Auckland studio to talk with PR and communications legend Brian Sweeney about his life and business and what he's learned. Brian, thanks very much for joining us.
Good to see you, Jake.
Cheers. Thanks very much for your time, and really
You're welcome.
appreciate it. So just to kick this off, what would be sort of one of the most transformative experiences you've ever had in business, and what did that teach you?
Well, it was a transformative moment, and it came in a car ride. Through my career, working in language, working with corporations and working in the entertainment business, and through academic work, I was often in search of identity and purpose. And I was particularly interested in what's the purpose of New Zealand and how do I define myself within that construct. And in the late 90s, I was driving to Kari Beach out of Auckland with a guy called Kevin Kelly, who was the founding editor of Wired magazine, and he was asking me lots of questions about New Zealand and the who, the what, the why, and I made a statement along the lines of that a disproportionate number of New Zealanders had changed the world in some way, and I quoted lots of examples, and I said I didn't know why that was, and he said that's really easy to explain, and he downloaded to me a theory from evolutionary biology called punctuated equilibrium that says that change in a species happens first on the edge, on the margins. Okay. And so therefore New Zealand's role in the world was to be a change agent. And I thought this is phenomenal, that instead of being thought of being isolated, remote, we actually had a role in the world, a place in the world. And out of this we developed a business purpose statement, winning the world from the edge. And so that's our purpose and direction in business, and it came out of a car ride to Kari Beach. Okay,
fantastic. And your story itself is obviously quite extraordinary, from really being a Kiwi businessman that's gone global. So why did you want to get into PR and communications in the first place? What, I guess, sparked that interest in you?
So I guess my interest in communication was sparked as a child growing up in the 60s, and we experienced the introduction of television, the civil rights movement in America, the race to the moon. What was coming through in the media was very exciting, and so it set my course of being involved in public life in some way. And I had an initial career in the entertainment business and show business, and through some strategy and some events that happened to us, we found ourselves in the PR business running a consultancy, and we were most interested in adding value to business rather than being involved in politics. We loved the cut and thrust of business, and we loved how companies were going through a transformative phase from being government owned to being publicly listed companies, from analog to digital. There were a whole lot of big shifts that were happening in the economy, so we got sort of quite caught up in a big shift that was happening within New Zealand.
Yeah, and I guess as a youngster at age 9 you edited your first newspaper, and at 17 you were involved in protests in Maraoa. So I guess from a young age you're obviously always interested in sort of politics and communication and everything as well. So do you think in the big picture, when you look back, that early interest helped you build your company, SweeneyVesty, today?
Sure. I was brought up in a small country town in a Catholic family, and it was always impressed upon us that we should be involved in the bigger picture. And while the course of my life didn't take me down necessarily a religious one, certainly the sense of contributing to the community in the country that you were in and the world that you lived in was uppermost. So, and there were a number of, events. I referenced the 1960s in New Zealand, and in the 1980s there were a lot of turmoil. In the 70s we had French nuclear testing in Maraoa, and I was at school in Tauranga, which was the port in which a lot of the protest boats left from, so we got caught up on that with the school newspaper. And at university there were Springbok tours and all sorts of issues of the day. Muldoon was Prime Minister, 1981, the Springbok tour, so there was a lot for us to get involved in.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess it was, you obviously went to, was it Waikato, and studied politics?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that political interest was always there, wasn't it?
I was interested in how societies operated, how the different forces in society would come together to make a coherent or a dysfunctional whole.
Yeah. And in 1987, with Jane Vesty, you founded SweeneyVesty, a global corporate communications company, and you're the global chairman today. So what was the vision from the start?
The vision from the start of SweeneyVesty was to build a large-scale consultancy that was involved in the big transformative shifts that were happening in the economy. In the PR business, there's a lot of freelancers, there's a lot of solo operators. We were determined to build a firm of some scale. We were very interested in what the right size should be, what the right critical mass that you needed to be in order to be a profitable, growing, sustainable organisation. So scale was important, and that meant having to pursue large-scale clients who actually needed to communicate. Such were the challenges that they were going through, that they absolutely needed to communicate to employees, to customers, to regulators, to the market, what they were doing.
Yeah, and you're obviously still following that vision today with offices opening up all over the world.
Sure. Well, it came to a point in the late 1990s when we had the opportunity with a client to work globally, and I don't think it had been part of our strategy to be a global company. We wanted to be a large local company involved in big things, but it was fantastic to be able to test our skills internationally and to grow a global operation. We've worked in over 50 countries. We've got 8 offices around the world, and that gives us a deep sense of satisfaction that we have been able to build an international operation.
Yeah, and just talking about those offices, I mean, obviously Wellington 1987, Auckland 1992, Sydney 1994, New York 2003, London 2009, Berlin 2012, Singapore 2013, Columbus this year. So, I mean, offices opening up everywhere, it's awesome. So you say from the start you didn't have that vision as such to open up offices all over the world. That was something that flowed on from an opportunity?
It flowed on from an opportunity. I mean, we wanted to be major within New Zealand, and at that time there was sufficient work and challenge and excitement within that context to satisfy us, and it really wasn't until a client opportunity presented itself did the notion of being able to work globally occurred to us. And of course this is in the context of New Zealand needing to be an export economy. I mean, fundamentally our survivability as a nation comes from our ability to export, have a commercial relationship with the world, and I think that in the late 90s we had the skill and the experience and the maturity to be able to take that step.
Yeah, fantastic. And even within the last 3 years, I mean, offices opened up every single year. So what's the plan for the foreseeable future? Do you want to keep opening up offices globally?
The plan for the foreseeable future is to work with the footprint that we have. I mean, we really have got the world covered in terms of the Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific, and we want to grow within that footprint. A lot of the work gets moved around between offices. Auckland and Wellington are a very important part of the process in terms of a lot of work that we deliver internationally is done in Auckland and Wellington, and it's a real thrill to be able to utilise a New Zealand base in that way.
And what are the advantages of, having the bases all over the world?
The advantages of having bases all over the world are A, to be able to service global clients, 2, to be able to win business from different parts of the world, to be diversified, and to be part of emergent markets.
Yeah, so one thing I've been thinking about is can companies in New Zealand be based in New Zealand, have a New Zealand presence, but still export in the same way? Do you think you could have grown to the size you are now just having one base here in New Zealand?
Well, I think that the extraordinary example that we have in New Zealand is Sir Peter Jackson and the film business. I mean, he didn't want to move to Hollywood and saw that he had a vision of being able to have a global company operated out of Kilburnie, Miramar, Wellington. So yes, it is possible. I mean, really though, if you do want an export business, you have to travel, you have to go there, you have to go back there. It's a long game. You have to be dedicated. You have to have resources. You can't do it on the smell of an oily rag because it's just too expensive to do otherwise. But I mean, certainly that's the business game that New Zealand needs to be involved in.
Yeah, awesome. And I just want to talk a wee bit about, the different types of PR that you guys have been involved in, from obviously communicating large-scale organisational change, financial restructuring, competitive strategies, changes in ownership, etc. What type of PR and communications do you personally enjoy the most, and why?
Sure. So the type of PR that I most enjoy would be first and foremost strategic.
Yep.
In terms of, is it big picture? It could be an organisation seeking to craft new language and identity and purpose. I'm good in a crisis. I've done quite a lot of crisis management, and you are in the middle of often very stressful situations with a lot that no one has been able to control, and you have to be the calm voice and the decisive voice within that. There's a lot of adrenaline pumping. Sometimes these things can run for 2 or 3 months or 2 or 3 years sometimes. You've got to be able to have a lot of depth and a lot of foresight to be able to aid the company through that situation.
And just talking about the crisis management, I mean, it must get pretty intense sometimes. So is there quite a specific process about when something happens, about going down and working out, I guess, all the things that need to be communicated, and I can imagine it'll have to be quite quick as well.
There are many different types of crises. We've mapped them, and probably there are sort of 28 shades of issues in crisis, and each one of them is quite unique. There are some golden rules for certain situations, and certainly there are types of incidents in which a public presence and public communication is absolutely part of the solution, and there are a number of others where you actually want to be able to withdraw and to almost remove the air from the room, as it were.
Yeah, and you talk about some of those golden rules. Is there anything in particular that you would pass on to business owners, I guess, potentially going through a bit of a crisis in terms of PR and what they should be doing? What would you
Well, I mean, the first thing is, the obvious thing is to have planned ahead. I mean, scenario planning, crisis management planning involves sitting down with an expert and going through all the potential crises that your organisation could face, and really interrogate the range of things that could go wrong and being prepared. So that's the first and obvious thing. And obviously, in the middle of a crisis, it's too late to sit down and do that. I mean, if you find yourself in the middle of a crisis, I mean, the thing is to gather experts around you. There's always lawyers, and lawyers can be a fantastic resource for helping navigate through difficult situations. Having a communications expert, having a relatively small and tight team, and being completely transparent to that team. Because the worst thing that can happen in a crisis is to be blindsided by information that people haven't disclosed to you.
Yeah.
So you've got to get it all out onto the table, be brutally honest to your own team, so they can assess the actions and strategies that need to be taken.
So transparency in the team's important. What about transparency to the world and who you're communicating with? Is that always something that you would encourage to be at the forefront, or do you sometimes have to be a bit more strategic and work out when to release it?
I think that you have to be strategic in terms of what is the right thing to do by the law of the land, by corporate ethics and governance. Those things are incredibly important, and if that means needing to apologise, if it needs to take responsibility, obviously that's what you need to do. I mean, we live in a very open society. Information is broadly available, and you can't really hide. So, but there are instances in which it's not necessary. An issue hasn't become a public issue, public safety is not involved, there's no laws being broken, there's no politicians being compromised. I mean, there's a lot that can be dealt with, and is dealt with within side companies.
So just talk a bit about SweeneyVesty, obviously founded in 1987, provides business strategy and communication services to corporations and public organisations. So I guess in terms of long-standing clients and clients you've had for a long time, firstly, how do you go about getting such high-profile, well, not just high-profile, but high-value clients on board? Was that a challenge from the start, or was there quite a specific way you went about that?
When we started our business, we very quickly identified the need to work with large companies rather than small companies. And that's not to say we haven't and don't work with small companies, it's just that if you want to build a business, you've got to work with companies of scale. And really, we had a target list, and we found ways in which to have conversations, build relationships, get introductions, identify needs, and one thing would lead to another, and we would have an assignment which would often lead to 3 or 4 more and 10 or 15 more, and so we found ourselves, and as I say, the economy was in a transformative phase, so there was a huge amount of work that was needing to be done, and one large corporation, we would usually have about 50 projects on the go at any one period of time.
Wow, okay. Yeah, and once you've got those high value clients on board, how do you keep them on board? Is it a lot of relationship management and so on? Or?
Well, you keep them on board first and foremost through the quality of your work. I mean, you can have great relationships, but if you do bad work, then the relationship will go bad pretty soon. So a lot of it comes through the value add, the difference that you make, the quality that you supply, and the independence of the advice, because there is definitely a role for independent agencies in this rather than getting everything internal, which tends to become quite insular. So we're seen as a strong independent council with a major ability to implement difficult stuff. I mean, often we became the too hard basket of companies. They had knotty problems that they would delegate to us, and it was an effective way for them to manage their business at hand.
Okay, and as a company, I mean, you guys are obviously involved with lots of PR and communications in terms of corporates, but also government and also individual CEOs and business leaders and so on. So what are some of the key differences with managing PR for corporations versus government versus individuals?
The shades of difference between managing a corporate account as opposed to a government department, and I distinguish between the work of government rather than the politics of government, which we tend to steer clear of. Okay. That's quite another whole field and discipline in which there are people who, if you're going to be involved in that, be involved only in that. I think that government or politics and business have got completely different ways of operating. The rules are pretty much the same. I mean, consider everything as transparent, everything has the potential to be disclosed, be professional, operate ethically, same sort of rules.
Yeah, and for the individuals, I mean, is it about working with individuals who are, I guess, already on the way up sometimes, or have you worked with, I guess, individuals before who are maybe on the way, having some really difficult times, and you've got to sort of help them manage a personal situation?
Sure.
That? I mean, is it about chucking jet fuel on an already awesome fire? Or?
Well, a number of CEOs who we work with who want to develop profile are usually on their way somewhere. Okay. Often business owners entrepreneurs who need to build their profile and develop their story and lead by example. Often if it's a sort of senior corporate executive, they are wanting to stake out a point of view. They want to have a profile that's delivered through speeches and presentations and points of view and so on. So it's quite a personal element to PR because you're dealing with someone's voice and their personality and sometimes their appearance and how they present themselves. So in fact, the work that we did in show business in the very early days was very useful in terms of being able to train people and take them through a process to be very confident and acutely compelling speakers and opinion givers.
Yeah, awesome. And what's your advice in terms of, I guess, companies, individuals putting out PR? Is it important to keep putting new stuff out and keep it interesting? Is that something you encourage your clients, is to always come up with new things? To almost keep them in the media as such?
Often large corporations have a media profile whether they like it or not, such as the scale of their operations, that they just sort of generate news. So sometimes that needs to be managed from an issues point of view. Yes, companies do want good news to be told, but it's not indiscriminate. They want to do it around purpose. They want to do it around a calendar of events in terms of project launches or project milestones. There's got to be some reason for them to have profile rather than do it just for the sake of it.
Yeah, and what would be some of the things that you observe from, I guess, some of the companies that do PR the best in the world? What are some of the key things that the absolute best companies in the world, what do they all do that's different to the rest of the world?
I think that the best operating companies in the world have got a very clear sense of purpose. Everyone knows what they stand for, employees, customers, the market. They've got a clear market direction. They've got key language, and whether that comes through in a advertising proposition. I mean, the ultimate driving machine, it's been around for 34 years. We all know that that's what BMW stands for. So companies who are able to articulate their sense of purpose can bring everybody else along with them in the slipstream.
And what about internal communications and the very best companies? What do they do differently internally for communicating with their own staff and shareholders and stakeholders?
There are many different styles of internal communication. Some of them are led by the CEO, some of them are more dispersed. Companies have got town hall meetings, they have got newsletters, intranets. I mean, again, it comes back to what is the sense of purpose. I like using the phrase that Sir Peter Blake had in the America's Cup: how do we make the boat go faster? Every action in the team and the supporters was judged by that sole thing. And so clearly expressing the purpose of the organisation in a short number of words means that the whole organisation can go there, and the rest of it's sort of like detail.
And that was part one with Brian Sweeney. We'll be back in 1 minute to talk about taking the business global. We'll also be talking about Brian's beliefs on PR and also on brand and how that relates to PR. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're here to talk about Brian Sweeney and his journey in taking SweeneyVesty global. So Brian, what were some of the biggest challenges in taking your business to the world?
Some of the biggest challenges in taking the business to the world have simply been administrative and structural: immigration, banking, setting up companies in other countries. It's not a simple process of going to another country and setting up business. There is a lot of onerous regulation. There are interrelationships between companies. There are double tax agreements. So you need great lawyers and accountants, both with a global point of view and with local expertise, who you can set yourself up. And we've had to do this in America, Britain, Singapore, around the world where we've set up. You've got to go through this process.
And is each country very different, or are they all quite similar?
Each country has got a similar process, but with quite distinct differences, and you can't approach it with a one world approach. You've got to look at each market separately, and that sounds very boring, but you've got to get the plumbing right in order for everything above the surface to operate smoothly.
So what are some of the countries that are, I guess, the best to do business in that you've found?
New Zealand is a great place to do business. I mean, it's rated very highly in terms of its ease of setting up. Singapore has been really straightforward to establish a company in. I mean, it's got a number of hoops you have to work through, and there's some things that are quite different from other countries, but Singapore is a very pro-business country. I mean,
okay. And I guess in terms of your industry in particular, has it been quite a challenge working out different ways to, I guess, put communications and PR in different sort of geographical areas? You're saying before that you've worked within sort of 100 cities and 50 countries. So do different areas communicate differently? And is that quite a challenge to learn about the different cultural things?
One of the great revelations has been this is one world. Yes, there are cultural differences and there's cultural nuance, but we are one Facebook, we are one Google, we are one Instagram. The notion of globalization has been almost complete because of the internet and YouTube and email, and I think that human nature is pretty much the same around the world. People do want the same sorts of things in life in terms of feeling a sense of prosperity, a sense of progress, a sense of fairness and freedom. They want clean clothes and they want to have fun on the weekend. And I mean, it's a wonderful thing, human nature. And to find that it's got positive expressions in the same way right throughout the world is a very affirming thing.
So Kiwi business owners, I guess, don't need to be scared about different countries working differently in terms of communication. It's just we're one world kind of thing.
Well, it is one world, but if you're in the communications business, you are very good observers, you're very good listeners, you pick up on nuance, you scan the environment, and you use these things in order to be like a team player. You can't go into a market with a lot of preconceptions. I think that New Zealanders are very adaptable, flexible people. We're well accepted throughout the world, and we've got a great sense of working as a team and working with people.
So just to finish off this sort of global segment, I guess what would your sort of parting bits of advice be for business owners in New Zealand looking at taking their business to the world or to another country around PR and communications? How should they go about getting profile in a new country?
Sure. Well, in terms of New Zealand businesses going to other markets and seeking profile, hire a professional. I mean, there are specialist companies all over the place who know local markets. You can't go overseas and have a do-it-yourself approach. You need introductions, you need referrals, you need access, you need people to introduce you, and that's what hiring a PR company does. And there are a number of different levels in which you can do it, but expect to pay a retainer and to engage someone for 6 months. I mean, and these companies are busy. I mean, they aren't there waiting for you to walk in the door. So you've got to go with a deliberate intent of engaging a PR company to do these things for you.
So I just want to talk about your beliefs in regards to PR and communications. So what are some of the core beliefs you hold about PR and communications?
One, that it can make a big difference. This is a hard return. It's a real value add to a corporation's bottom line and its reputational capital. And it needs to be led by the CEO. I mean, there needs to be a fundamental belief in the C-suite that PR makes a difference. And in fact, there are a lot of CEOs who are not really trained in the discipline of PR or don't really have an awareness of it, and therefore diminish its importance. So I think that for CEOs, make a real effort to understand the discipline and the value that it can add.
Okay, and what's one of the commonly held beliefs in the industry about PR that you believe to be incorrect?
That PR is about spin, that it's flaky, that it's about sorting out problems, keeping people out of the media. I mean, there are a number of things that sometimes the PR profession has brought upon itself that lead to a view that it's not a serious discipline. However, it's a really serious discipline, particularly outside of New Zealand. I mean, in America, it's considered a completely necessary and expected part of the governance of the C-suite. In New Zealand, there's still, I think, a bit of suspicion about the discipline and the value that it can add.
Okay, and when a client comes to you with something that they want to get some promotion for, I remember being explained to once that quite often a company will come to a PR company with something that's just completely not malleable and it's just not going to get in the media, whereas quite often it comes and it's sort of like that, and the PR company's job is to make it so it does get some exposure. So are there any secrets in terms of getting stuff out there? I guess making things go viral and getting things in the media, in the paper, on TV, or does it come down to whatever it is you're trying to sell?
When someone comes to you with an idea that you clearly don't think is going to work, then you really need to say that you don't think it's going to work. I mean, not everything is PRable, as it were. Yeah. I mean, the key thing is, what's new, what's distinctive, what is special about this. I mean, there is a demand. I mean, the news cycle is hungry. It needs news stories coming through. So there is certainly a process by which stuff gets reported. I think that if it's imaginative, if it has a good spokesperson, if it improves someone's life rather than a stunt, I think that's where a lot of the litmus test is these days in terms of stories. Does it improve people's lives?
Yeah, okay. And what are some of the key mistakes, I guess, you see being made in the industry quite often?
Key mistakes that are made with PR is not valuing it strategically, seeing it as a very tactical tool, and yes it is, it's a very effective tactical tool, but PR needs to be considered in terms of the long term, the long game of the company.
Yeah, and how's it changed, I guess, with the development of digital technologies and so on? Is it forever changing?
Digital has certainly sped things up. There's a continuous news cycle. I mean, the days when you used to go to the Herald printing plant at Ellerslie at 4 a.m. to get the first edition of the paper, well and truly gone. Yeah, so digital is, and it's made things a lot more transparent, and I think that all these things are very good things. I think companies are better run, they're more attuned to the marketplace, to what customers are thinking, to the response that they can get when they put a foot wrong. Digital has been a great innovation for PR.
And within companies, I guess internally as well, how is communication changing and how do you see it changing in the future?
I think communication within companies has probably changed a lot less than it has in the marketplace.
Okay.
I came back to this thing about a core purpose. If people know what the company stands for, its belief systems, its operating principles, then everything else should flow from that. And yes, there are internal Twitters and there are intranets and all these sorts of things, but I think it's changed much less than it has in the external market.
Okay, great. So just to talk briefly about brands now, I've just got one question around that in terms of, I guess, how important is for a company doing PR to have a solid brand? I mean, there's been some examples recently. Let's take Malaysia Airlines, for example. I've seen them doing PR and I guess it seems like whatever they do, they're sort of doomed and they get told off for something because it's insensitive here or insensitive there. So is it important to have a good brand when you're doing PR? And if you don't have a good brand, should you build the brand first before you even try and go to the world?
Sure. I mean, a good branding is fundamental to doing business. I mean, these days people are not simply interested in what your product does for them. They want to know who they're doing business with and that company is doing good by the world and by their community. So transparency has really helped much better practice within corporations and has opened PR up into a lot of interesting new spaces.
Brilliant. Okay, that was part 2 with Brian Sweeney. We'll be back soon to talk about the legacy and the life questions and the final bits of advice. Welcome back to part 3. We're on to the rapid burst questions now. So, Brian Sweeney, what are the 4 main breakthroughs you've had in your career?
Main breakthroughs have all involved meeting people or working with people. First off, seeing the top twins.
Okay.
1980. 1979, I was an A&R man, as it were, for the Students' Arts Council. I booked them for their first tour on the spot, and we worked together for about 7 years. It was an extremely happy time, a lot of fun, hugely popular, and it paved the way to the careers that they have today. Second breakthrough, meeting SweeneyVesty, who my wife, my business partner, love of my life. She has got extraordinary skills that I don't have. We're a great combination, we're a great balance, and we love the business that we've built and the family that we've built as well. Third person, meeting Kevin Roberts, CEO worldwide of Saatchi & Saatchi. Saatchi had been a client of ours when Kevin was appointed to the worldwide role, and he asked to do some stuff, and it was a relationship that we both got each other straight away, and he is an extraordinarily astute user of communication, and it's been a fantastic relationship through many years and many countries.
Okay, fantastic. And I guess what's one of the best bits of advice you've ever been given, and by whom?
One of the best and simplest pieces of advice I've been given is start with the answer. And it was the operating motto of a captain of industry from the United States who I had done some work with. And a lot of organisations and people progress in a very linear way forward rather than visualising what the future, what the outcome might be and working backwards. So I think if you have a start with the answer approach to problem solving, then you'll get there a lot quicker.
And what leaders, I guess, globally and just within communities and so on, do you learn off the most, and why is that?
The leaders I've been inspired by most in my life have stood for something, have been able to articulate that and put it across, and have staked a clear direction for their country or their company. You look at countries like France, which is in a complete muddle at the moment. Even President Obama in America has struggled to articulate the vision, and as a result, the politics in America is quite muddled. That's in contrast to other leaders, probably more historically than currently, who have staked out the future and said, I'm going to take this country there.
Okay. And in regards to upskilling, what do you do yourself to keep upskilling, and is it important to keep upskilling in business?
In terms of upskilling, I mean, what I do is I read voraciously, widely, weirdly. It's important to cover the bases to absolutely know what's going on. And so I've got set things I read during each day, and then come the weekends I'll branch out and do some more, unusual things. I mean, communication and creativity is frequently about connecting things and connecting disparate pieces of information and knowledge, and the broader knowledge set that you have, then the quicker and better solutions that you will have. And yes, go to talk fests. I mean, a defining moment of my life was going to the TED conferences for 10 years from 1994, being exposed to new stuff, to different styles of presenting, new perspectives. And I think that it's much more important to be open to inspiration than it is to learn how to do something in a technical sense. Yes. I'm not dismissing that, but I'm just saying concentrate on the big stuff, on the heart and the head stuff, rather than the tactile.
So, and how do you see business in the world changing over the next, 5 to 20 years? What do you see being some of the key changes?
Business is going to be more global. We are one world, there are open borders, the internet is a global platform. We're going to be more digital, it's going to be more transparent. I believe it will be more sustainable, because I think that the consciousness within corporations of the need to produce products that don't add to the carbon profile of the world is quite significant. And I think that it will be more purposeful. I think that companies actually are acutely sensitive to having a good reputation and doing good work, and how that adds to the bottom line, because frankly customers don't want to do business with companies that don't stand for those things. So I think it's all very positive.
Yeah, and the way that companies go marketing their products, do you see that changing as well? Or?
I see it changing in the sense that it is framed around this question: how will you improve my life? It's not about that I've got a shinier bonnet, or a new this, or a innovative that. It's got to be framed in the context of the customer and how you're going to improve their life.
And one thing you said at the beginning of this interview is that you believe a disproportionate number of New Zealanders have changed the world in some way, and your website, NZ Edge, obviously showcases New Zealand talent and so on. So why do you believe that that's the case?
Well, why do I believe that a disproportionate number of New Zealanders have changed the world in some way? Because it's our role. I mean, the beautiful thing about this is that it doesn't come from a catchy advertising slogan. This comes from evolutionary biology, and New Zealand has got a role in the world as a change agent, and our geography in the world almost behoves us to take on this role. So it's something that we are destined to do.
Okay, right. So just to finish off, we've just got a couple of questions, I guess, around legacy and life in general. So what's next for you, Brian, and for SweeneyVesty as a company?
SweeneyVesty wants to keep on doing what it's doing. We have got growth ambitions, not wild growth ambitions. I think that we're very sensitive to what is the appropriate critical mass for our type of business, both in terms of scale and geography. And this is quite a personally intense business, so you can't just add on production lines of people. It's a very personal business, and the teams that we have are very acutely picked, and people have been with us for a long time. It's when you recruit, it's quite an intense process. So we will continue to advance along the current course of action.
Yeah, fantastic. And when you look over your whole business career so far, what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of Jane and I building a global business, an international business. We're really proud that it's come from New Zealand roots. We're really proud of the fact that New Zealand has got a fundamental ongoing role in the global element of the business. But the purpose statement, winning the world from the edge, that's what we've sought to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just a quite an open question. What do you personally want your legacy to be as a global business person?
Winning the world from the edge.
Yeah. So someone coming from New Zealand and taking a company global and doing incredibly well.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we love doing this as a people. I mean, 1905 All Blacks. I mean, we love taking on the world and beating it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we go into our final question, I guess what would be something you've learned along the way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be to do a business, but just about life that you would want to pass on to anyone who's watching this? What's something that you've learned?
Be generous, show gratitude, pay it forward. I think that there's enough in the world that we don't, love and generosity can conquer all, and I think that being generous of spirit is the most important thing you can be.
Absolutely. So Brian, look, you're an incredible Kiwi entrepreneur who's gone global. So to finish off, can you please look down this camera here and tell us, what is your $1 million advice for the world of business entrepreneurship and making things happen?
My $1 million piece of advice is to find your edge. Find what is really distinctive about your offering, your personal skill level, and work on that, refine it, hone it, sharpen it, and take it to the world.
Brian Sweeney, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jake.
Cheers.
That's great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.